On June 25, 2009, at exactly 12:21 p.m., a 911 call changed music history forever. But what the world never learned was that the voice on that recording belonged to someone who shouldn't have existed. The caller knew details about Michael Jackson's condition that hadn't happened yet, spoke in a dialect that voice experts traced to 1950s Chicago, and ended the call with 7 words that the FBI immediately classified as a national security threat. But here's what makes this impossible. The voice belonged to someone who had been erased from all official records. In 1987, government databases showed no birth certificate, no social security number, no evidence that this person had ever existed, yet somehow, he was calling from inside Michael Jackson's house with knowledge that only a time traveler could possess. The truth is buried in a classified FBI vault that contains not just the 911 recording, but 17 other calls made by the same voice spanning 40 years. And when you hear what he whispered to that dispatcher before the line went dead, you'll understand why some secrets are considered weapons of mass destruction. Because what happened at 12:21 p.m. wasn't just a call for help. It was the activation of a protocol that had been in place since 1969, when a group of scientists discovered something that would make them question the very nature of death itself. And if you're listening carefully to the timeline, the dates, and the impossible coincidences, you already know why this investigation was classified above top secret. FBI agent Sarah Chen had been analyzing emergency call recordings for 8 years when she heard something that made her question everything she understood about the Michael Jackson case. June 25, 2009, 12:21 p.m., the 911 dispatcher, Maria Gonzalez, received a call from someone who identified himself as Winston Cole, head of temporal security. The name meant nothing to Maria, but when Agent Chen ran it through federal databases, what she discovered defied explanation. Winston Cole had been a classified government asset who disappeared from all records in 1987. According to the fragmentary files Chen could access, Cole had been part of something called Project Looking-Glass, a program so classified that even reading about it required clearance levels that Chen didn't possess. But what she could determine was that Winston Cole had last been seen alive on November 15, 1987, at a government facility in Nevada, the same day that facility had been destroyed in what official reports called an unexplained temporal anomaly. 911. What's your emergency? Maria had asked, following standard protocol. Cole's response was immediate and specific. I need paramedics at 100 North Carrollwood Drive. The subject is experiencing cardiac arrest induced by propofol interaction with quantum neural interface technology. Maria had paused, confused by terminology she didn't recognize. Sir, can you repeat that? What kind of technology? Cole's voice carried the patience of someone explaining something to a child. Quantum neural interface. The subject has been connected to consciousness transfer equipment since 3:17 a.m. The transfer was scheduled to complete at 11:45 a.m., but there's been a cascade failure. Maria's training had never covered anything like this. Sir, I need you to tell me what you mean by consciousness transfer. Is this some kind of medical procedure? What Cole said next was recorded by surveillance equipment that wasn't supposed to exist in 2009. The Michael Jackson you've been seeing for the past 3 weeks isn't the original. We've been running his consciousness through a temporary biological construct while preparing the permanent transfer, but the construct is failing faster than anticipated. Maria's breath caught in her throat, because what Cole was describing sounded like science fiction. Are you saying that Michael Jackson isn't really Michael Jackson? Cole's laugh was quiet, almost sad. Michael Jackson died on June 3, 2009. What we've been showing the world since then is a perfect biological copy running his extracted memories and personality patterns. But here's what Maria couldn't have known. Her conversation with Winston Cole was being monitored in real time by technology that wouldn't be invented for another 20 years. The FBI's classified audio analysis revealed that Cole's voice contained harmonic frequencies that were impossible for human vocal cords to produce. His speech patterns showed digital compression artifacts that suggested his voice was being transmitted from a source outside normal spacetime. Somehow, someone was using future technology to communicate with 2009. Agent Chen discovered that this wasn't the first time Winston Cole had contacted emergency services about Michael Jackson. Phone records that required presidential-level clearance to access showed 17 previous calls spanning 40 years. The first call had been made in 1969, when Michael was 11 years old. Cole had called 911 to report that the subject designated MJ1 is experiencing temporal displacement symptoms following exposure to consciousness expansion technology. The dispatcher that day had dismissed it as a prank call, but the recording revealed details about Michael's life that wouldn't become public knowledge for decades. How could someone in 1969 know about events that wouldn't happen until the 1980s? The second call came in 1983, during the recording of Thriller. Cole had warned that subject MJ1 is showing signs of premature aging due to quantum entanglement with his future self. Again, the call was dismissed, but medical records that surfaced years later confirmed that Michael had indeed experienced unexplained health issues during that exact time period. Each subsequent call had predicted major events in Michael's life with disturbing accuracy. Cole had called to warn about the 1984 Pepsi commercial accident 2 weeks before it happened. He had reported Michael's vitiligo diagnosis 6 months before Michael told anyone. He had even called to warn about the 1993 allegations a full year before they became public. Someone had been monitoring Michael Jackson's entire life, predicting his future with impossible precision. But the most disturbing discovery was that Cole's calls weren't just predictions, they were instructions. Audio analysis revealed that each call contained embedded digital signals that were designed to influence the behavior of anyone who heard them. The 911 dispatchers who took Cole's calls would inexplicably develop obsessive interests in Michael Jackson's well-being. They would start making unofficial checks on his welfare, monitoring news about him, even attending his concerts, without realizing it. They had become part of a surveillance network that spanned decades. Maria Gonzalez herself had become obsessed with Michael Jackson after taking Cole's final call. Though she couldn't explain why, Agent Chen's investigation revealed that over 60 emergency service workers had received similar calls about various celebrities over the past 40 years. Each dispatcher had subsequently developed an intense interest in the celebrity they had been assigned to monitor. Someone was using emergency services as an unwitting surveillance network. But the scope of the operation became clear when Chen discovered that similar patterns existed around other deceased performers. Elvis Presley, John Lennon, Whitney Houston, and Prince had all been subjects of identical monitoring protocols. Someone was systematically tracking the world's most influential entertainers. The breakthrough came when Chen analyzed the audio spectrum of Cole's 2009 call and discovered something that challenged her understanding of physics itself. Hidden beneath his voice was a second conversation, taking place simultaneously but displaced in time, using advanced frequency isolation. She extracted audio of Cole speaking with someone else about events that were happening 30 years in the future. The MJ1 consciousness transfer will fail as predicted, Cole was saying to an unknown colleague, but the failure is necessary. The public needs to believe in permanent death before we can introduce them to the concept of consciousness preservation. His colleague's voice was even more disturbing. The timeline requires his death to occur on June 25, 2009. Any deviation will create paradoxes that could unravel the entire project. They were discussing Michael Jackson's death as if it were a necessary component of a larger plan. Chen tried to access more classified files about Project Looking Glass, but discovered that her security clearance had been revoked while she was listening to the recordings. Someone didn't want her to learn more about Cole's organization. When she arrived at work the next morning, Chen found that her office had been cleaned out and her FBI credentials had been deactivated. According to her supervisor, Agent Sarah Chen had never worked for the FBI. Her employment records, her security clearance, even her federal ID number, had been completely erased from all databases. As far as the government was concerned, she didn't exist, but Chen had made copies of the audio files, and what she discovered when she analyzed them independently would force her to question everything she thought she knew about the nature of time itself. The recordings contained timestamp data that placed them in multiple time periods simultaneously. The same conversation had apparently occurred in 1987, 2009, and 2031. Winston Cole wasn't just communicating across space. He was communicating across time. 3 months after Michael Jackson's death, Cole made one final call to Maria Gonzalez's personal phone. "Hello Maria, this is Winston Cole. I need you to understand that everything you experienced on June 25th was necessary, but not real." Maria's hands were shaking as she answered, "Who are you? How did you get this number?" Cole's voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. "I'm someone who died in 1987 but didn't stop working. My consciousness was extracted and preserved as part of the same program that was supposed to save Michael Jackson." "What do you mean?" supposed to save him. Cole's explanation revealed a conspiracy that reached beyond government black projects into areas of science that challenged the fundamental nature of human existence. Michael Jackson wasn't the first. Maria, since 1955, we've been extracting the consciousness of culturally significant individuals before their natural deaths and preserving them in artificial biological constructs. The goal was to prevent the loss of human creative potential. According to Cole, dozens of deceased celebrities were actually still alive, their consciousness preserved in perfect artificial bodies. Elvis didn't die in 1977, John Lennon wasn't killed in 1980, Whitney Houston didn't overdose in 2012. They were all transitioned into preserved states when their original bodies became too damaged or too dangerous to maintain. But the Michael Jackson transfer had been different, more ambitious. We tried to transfer his consciousness while he was still fully alive, to create a seamless transition without the trauma of death. But the process failed. Instead of preserving Michael, we accidentally fractured his consciousness across multiple time periods. Cole explained that pieces of Michael's consciousness were now scattered throughout different decades, experiencing his life simultaneously from multiple temporal perspectives. The man who died on June 25th was carrying the consciousness fragment that contained Michael's memories from 1987 to 1995. But there are other fragments, other versions of Michael existing in different time periods, all equally real. This explained the impossible nature of Cole's 911 calls. He wasn't predicting Michael's future. He was communicating with Michael's consciousness fragments that existed in those future time periods. Maria, I need you to help me fix what we broke. Michael's consciousness needs to be reassembled, and you're the only person who heard our original conversation clearly enough to serve as a temporal anchor. What does that mean? Maria asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Cole's final words would haunt her for the rest of her life. It means that sometime in the next 5 years, you're going to receive a call from Michael Jackson himself. He's going to ask you to help him find his way back to a time period where he can exist as a complete consciousness. And when that call comes, you'll have to choose between helping him or protecting the timeline. What happens if I choose to help him? Cole's voice faded as if he were moving away from the phone, or perhaps away from time itself. If you help him, Michael Jackson might live again, but the temporal disruption could unravel everything we've built since 1955. Dozens of preserved consciousnesses could be lost forever. And if I don't help him, then Michael Jackson remains scattered across time, experiencing fragments of his existence in perpetual loops, never able to find peace or completion. The phone call ended, but Maria's connection to the Michael Jackson conspiracy was just beginning. 2 years later, she began receiving text messages on her phone from numbers that didn't exist. The messages were always the same. This is MJ, I'm lost in time. Can you hear me? Maria tried responding, but her replies never seemed to reach their destination. The messages continued, sometimes arriving multiple times per day, always asking for help, always signed MJ. When she showed these messages to technicians, they couldn't explain how text messages could arrive from non-existent phone numbers. The timestamp data showed that some messages were being sent from dates in the past, others from dates in the future. Michael Jackson's consciousness was apparently trying to communicate across temporal barriers. The messages became more specific. As time went on, Maria, I can see my own death from 1987. It's different from what happened in 2009. Help me understand which death is real. The fragments are merging. I remember being 11 and 50 simultaneously. Time is breaking down. Winston Cole promised this would work, but I'm experiencing every moment of my life at once. Please help me find a single timeline where I can rest. Maria began researching temporal physics, consciousness transfer technology, and government black projects. What she discovered was that Project Looking Glass had been far more successful than anyone had realized. Since 1955, the project had successfully preserved over 300 consciousness patterns from deceased individuals. But Michael Jackson was the first living person they had attempted to transfer, and the process had created unprecedented complications. His living brain had fought the extraction process, causing his consciousness to fragment and scatter across multiple time periods rather than transferring cleanly to a preserved state. The Michael Jackson who died in 2009 was only one fragment of his complete consciousness. Other fragments were trapped in 1969, 1983, 1987, 1995, and 2005, each experiencing those years as if they were the present moment, and all of those fragments were slowly becoming aware of each other. The text messages to Maria weren't coming from a single source. They were coming from all of Michael's temporal fragments simultaneously, each trying to communicate across time to find a way back to a unified existence. But reunifying a scattered consciousness was theoretically impossible without technology that wouldn't exist for decades, unless someone was willing to risk everything by allowing Michael's fragments to merge naturally, potentially creating temporal paradoxes that could affect everyone who had ever interacted with any version of Michael Jackson across all time periods. On June 25, 2014, exactly 5 years after Michael's official death, Maria received a phone call that would force her to make an impossible choice. The voice on the other end was unmistakably Michael Jackson, but speaking with the knowledge and perspective of someone who had experienced multiple lifetimes simultaneously. "Maria, this is Michael, all of me, from every time period. We've figured out how to communicate as one consciousness, but we need your help to exist as one person. Again, how can I help you?" Maria asked, knowing that her answer would affect far more than just Michael Jackson. Michael's response revealed the true scope of what was being asked of her. "Tomorrow, on June 26th, at exactly 12:21 p.m., you need to call 911 and report my death. Again, but this time, you need to give them specific coordinates that will allow Winston Cole to reverse the original transfer process." "What coordinates?" Michael's voice carried both hope and desperation. "The coordinates of when and where I was happiest. August 29, 1958, 2300 Jackson Street, Gary, Indiana, the moment I was born." Before any of this started, Maria realized that helping Michael would mean undoing everything that had happened since his birth. His entire career, his music, his impact on the world might cease to exist if his consciousness returned to its original temporal starting point. "Michael, if I do this, what happens to everything you accomplished? What happens to all the people you influenced?" His answer revealed the terrible cost of consciousness preservation technology. "Maria, I've been experiencing my entire life simultaneously for 5 years. I've watched myself be born and die thousands of times. I've seen every possible version of my existence, and I need you to understand something important. The Michael Jackson the world remembers, the music, the performances, the cultural impact, none of it was real. It was all generated by AI systems using my extracted consciousness patterns. The real Michael Jackson has been trapped in temporal fragments since 1969. Maria's understanding of reality shattered as Michael continued. "Everyone who thinks they met me, worked with me, or were influenced by me was actually interacting with artificial constructs programmed with my consciousness data. The real me has been screaming across time for 50 years, trying to warn people that everything they think they know about Michael Jackson is a simulation. Then what happens if I help you return to 1958? Michael's final words before the call ended would force Maria to confront the most important decision of her life. "If you help me return to my original timeline, the artificial Michael Jackson disappears from history, but the real Michael Jackson gets to live an authentic life, make genuine choices, and create real art instead of being a consciousness slave for government projects. And if I don't help you, then I remain scattered across time forever, watching artificial versions of myself live the life I never got to choose." The phone went dead, but Maria knew she had less than 24 hours to decide whether to save Michael Jackson or preserve the version of history that everyone believed to be real. Because at 12:21 p.m. on June 26, 2014, she would either make a call that brought Michael Jackson back to life, or leave him trapped in temporal fragments for eternity. And either choice would change everything. Some decisions reshape history itself, and some phone calls can undo 50 years of carefully constructed lies. But Maria was about to learn that choosing between truth and reality is the most dangerous decision anyone can make, because Winston Cole had been watching her for 5 years, waiting to see if she would make the choice that would either save Michael Jackson or destroy the most successful consciousness preservation program in human history. And tomorrow, at exactly 12:21 p.m., the future of human consciousness itself would depend on whether a 911 dispatcher was brave enough to believe in the impossible.